Welcome back to another episode of Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. Joining me this week, Lucas Harkins and Rocco Miller. Guys, we are another week closer to March Madness. Lucas, I'll start with you. We have the Super Bowl coming up this weekend, and then college basketball is going to be dominating the calendar. How excited are you?
Oh, I'm not looking that far ahead to Super Bowl yet. We still got St. John's UConn tonight. Plenty of college basketball before Super Bowl. My Packers have already been eliminated. I am well into college basketball form right now, as a disappointing playoff experience for my Green Bay Packers once again. But college hoops is always there for us, and certainly tonight a really good matchup on deck, and then a pretty good NBC slate as well. Plenty of college hoops on the docket before Sunday, but obviously Sunday center stage with commercials and football.
Rocco, everyone wants to know, where in the world are you this time?
I got back home earlier this week after an amazing trip through the Midwest, through some of Lucas's area. I made it to Valparaiso at the beginning of that trip and got to Stephen F. Austin by the end. It was a lot of mix. Saw some big boys, saw some good mid-majors, beautiful mix. And then as it pertains to the Super Bowl, it's right here in our backyard. So and I'm from Seattle, so we just had a bunch of people fly in, diehard Seahawks. I'm not necessarily. I'm just a college basketball junkie. But, it's good for the city of Seattle. We'll pull for them over here. And I'm just trying to be a good host this weekend and also not miss any of this critical action right in front of us.
Yeah, it's a loaded slate of college basketball we'll get into later in the show. But I want to start here. Lucas, who was the biggest bracket winner of the week?
I think for me right now, it's about teams that can kind of push their way into the field conversation. And Oklahoma State winning at home against BYU was that one for me. I had Oklahoma State on the outside looking in by a few spots. I think they were not in my first four out earlier this week and needed a kind of a big opportunity to tackle on top of having a home win over UCF as well. They got that against BYU, and that's a big development for them. I think that's going to put them right in the cut line conversation. I'm sure we'll discuss later in the show where exactly myself and Rocco and the rest of our group have them. But the kind of season-changing win at this point in the year that's hard to get, even on your home floor, it's a difference maker. I think that's the biggest win. That's the biggest singular win in terms of what it means, a team that potentially moves from the bottom of a four line to a top of a four line at this point, not all that important. But when you jump from, maybe first 6 or 8 teams out to, right around the cut line, that's a huge move this time of year.
Rocco, who's your biggest winner of the week?
Well, I'm just going to say the obvious answer is Kansas, but we're going to talk about them later. So I'm going to take for this section NC State. Really, NC State was a team, I think when our very first show launched, they were on the outside looking in. They had just taken a bad loss to Georgia Tech. But since that point in time, a lot has changed. They go to SMU Tuesday night and get another big win. They were the better side. That game ends up being a 1-point win at the end because SMU stormed back in the final minute or so. But NC State earned the win. They were the better team that night, and another big road win. And it's really interesting when you look at the entire board right now. Vanderbilt, for me, is the 11th best team in the country per bracketology purposes. And after Vanderbilt, the entire board, nobody has more wins than NC State between quads 1 and 2. They have 11 of them. And that's a testament to how they scheduled, going out and buying teams like Liberty. And there's a bunch of examples like that added up for them. There's a lot of them that are just sneaking into quad 2. But when you start comparing teams in that 6, 7, 8, 9 range, that means a lot. And NC State, of course, now has the 2 road wins at the top that I mentioned with Clemson and SMU. And they were surprising for me to get up to a 7 seed this morning. So big winners this week for the Wolfpack.
Yeah, Will Wade and company, it's been much needed. After a bit of a rocky start, we're getting some interesting press conferences, and now they seem to be rolling. They got a big one against Virginia Tech coming up as well. Lucas, who's the loser of the week?
Well, I think to Rocco's point of Kansas being the winner that we didn't really mention, but the loser that we probably would jump to first is Gonzaga, in particular of where they would fall from probably a projected 2 or 3 seed down a little bit further, and I'm sure we'll discuss them as the show goes on. But obviously, their loss rather significant. Another one I'll throw in there is Stanford. Towards the back end of the bubble conversation, they take a home loss to Clemson. Obviously, it's a loss to a tournament team, but a home opportunity that they missed is one that's going to set them back towards the bubble. So those are the two that I would highlight right now.
Rocco, biggest loser?
I'll throw UCF in the mix. UCF still has an awesome resume. They've got that early win at Texas A&M and a couple of marquee home wins, of course, with Texas Tech and Kansas. And the Kansas one's improving, but home wins don't always move the needle, especially if UCF eventually lands near the bubble. And that's what I've got my eye on. And it was another opportunity for them to show, hey, are they a top 5 seed? Are they a top 6 seed? Obviously, nobody expected them to go into Houston, but they were not competitive there, much like they weren't competitive when they went to Iowa State, getting blown off the court. And that's one of the areas they're really struggling in seeding the Knights is the fact that they're deep into the 40s in some of these power measurements. That's a lot of how the 6, 7, 8, 9 lines get separated. And for UCF specifically, it was frankly kind of easy when I did all the comparisons to move them down to a 9 seed. And I know UCF fans, we have a great relationship down there, but they're going to bark about that. But I'm just basically simulating what the actual committee would do in this situation, what I believe they would do. And now you're also looking at a team that just has those 3 wins. The early Texas A&M win, which happened in week 2 of the season, obviously has aged beautifully for the most part. And then the 2 big home wins. UCF's going to have to add some substance down the stretch. They do have a bunch of manageable Big 12 games to go, but they will have to go to your BYU Cougars. They'll have to go to Utah in that state. And I'm just curious to see how this wraps up because they don't have another elite team besides the at BYU game left.
I'm shocked you didn't mention BYU as one of the biggest losers this week after giving up 99 points on the road to Oklahoma State. But I guess that is a quad 1 loss when it's all said and done. Lucas, thoughts on UCF or BYU as some of the bigger losers?
Yeah, I've got UCF a little bit higher, I think, than Rocco. I have UCF still on my 8 seed line. They have top 25 resume metrics across the board. That keeps them buoyed right now. I think to Rocco's point, though, if those drop, it becomes more of a notice where their predicted metrics stand. All 5 of their losses are in quadrant 1, 4 of those in the upper half of quadrant 1. I still have UCF a step ahead of those teams right now. To your point on BYU, it is just a quad 1 loss. But now they're 0-4 still in quadrant 1A. It's just they're lacking the top end quality that's going to keep them in protected seed range for me. We've got them probably more towards a 5, maybe even a 6 right now for the Cougars. So I think that's a setback for sure, and one that's going to keep them potentially out of protected seed territory. But still, metrics across the board, top 30. BYU's in very good shape and obviously has the remaining opportunities as soon as tomorrow against Houston at home to rise back up into that mix, especially when they still got Iowa State at home as well and Arizona, I believe, on the road. So there's chances for BYU to work itself back up and chances to fix that hole in their resume right now, which is those really, really top-end wins.
And I promise not to make this all about BYU, but is there any sort of disaster situation, Rocco, where they could miss the tournament if they keep free falling like this?
Well, I mean, yeah, hold your horses with that talk. I mean, look at this team. They're get out of here. AJ DeMonsta is like an elite talent, obviously. Richie Saunders is a veteran. They were terrific this is right at the same point of last year. I don't need to tell you this, Carter. At the same point last year where they ripped off like 9 wins in a row. So if anything, I'm expecting quite the opposite. But obviously for the sake of the exercise, there are a ton of tough games like hosting Houston tomorrow. They're going to go to Arizona, which is obviously daunting. Hosting Iowa State's another big one. Hosting UCF has some weight on it. Hosting Texas Tech at the end. But the Marriott Center is electric. And most of the games I just listed are in the Marriott Center. I would expect them to win each of those games except for maybe one. And they'll be sitting in this 3 through 5 seed range, I think, for the duration. I would be absolutely shocked if they lose a game like Colorado at home or West Virginia. Well, West Virginia and Cincinnati, they have a back-to-back. So, yeah, of course, they could lose one of those. Don't get swept on that. and they're going to be fine. Really, the home Colorado game is the only one that's a real torpedo.
It's very easy to look across the bracket and see teams with 3-4 losses around the bubble outside of quadrant 1. BYU can maximum lose 3. If they lose out the entire rest of the season, they only play 3 more games in quadrant 2 or 3. 2 in quadrant 3. 2 in quadrant 2, and then the 1 Rocco mentioned in quadrant 3.
Yeah, the main reason I brought it up, we were doing a live show after the Oklahoma State game this week, and BYU fans were in full freak out. Had to reassure them. I think
you have to
be fine in Provo.
Yeah. You're not a fan if you haven't lost your mind after a single loss. That's just what it's for.
Exactly. That's college basketball. But enough on BYU. Let's move on to the consensus number 1 seeds in the Fielding to 68 bracket here. We have Arizona as the number 1 overall. No shock. And there's really no change here at all. Once again, the top 4 is the exact same. Arizona, Duke, Michigan, UConn. And before we dive into these teams individually, I want to ask you guys this. Where do you feel these top 4 teams right now are on the same level as the top 4 we saw last year and how dominant they were? And I'll start with you, Lucas.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to compare year to year. I think probably top 4, not so much, in particular because of just where quality metrics like KenPom and BPI and T-Rank have UConn right now. From that perspective, they have UConn ranked 10th, 8th, and 7th. Whereas your usual 1 seed year to year, those teams are within the top 4. And maybe UConn gets there down the stretch of this season. They're certainly playing excellent basketball, particularly of late. They dominated Creighton on the road. They dominated Xavier at home. Maybe these are the kinds of margins that they're putting together that we maybe expected the last couple months. Despite the fact that they are, what they are. They're 22-1 with their only loss coming at home to the number 1 overall seed in a game they played without Terrace Reed and Braylon Mullins. Like UConn's really good, but I think from just an analytics standpoint, it's hard to compare last year's with this year's top 4 seeds across the board, top 1 seeds across the board, because of UConn being a little bit behind in those metrics than last year.
Rocco, do you agree?
I think it's a little different. Last year, by the end, we got to that point of clarity, which is a little bit rare to have it be exactly 4. Those 4 were the clear number 1 seeds, but we didn't know that about Florida at this time last year. Florida got red hot starting right about right now when they went to the jungle and they were the first team to beat Auburn. That changed everything for the course of the Gator season. And of course, they just never slowed down after that and won the whole thing. They got the last number 1 seed, right? So think about that, right? Like we didn't have that clarity. And I think right now, in my mind as an analyst, take away the bracketology part of it, I think there's 6 teams that are pretty darn elite. I would throw Illinois and Houston in this group because they're teams that I'd be scared to death to play right now. And that to me is a 1 seed. Who are you scared to death to play? And give me these 4, give me Illinois and Houston, and let's roll. And, we could see any 4 of this 6 at the end. Arizona's got a brutal finish. They're obviously on top and well-deserved right now. But if they drop 3 games, maybe even 4, they're probably not a 1 anymore. And Illinois still hasn't played Michigan yet, right? So we don't know what that looks like. Purdue, Michigan hasn't happened yet. So we're still in wait-and-see mode. We don't know where to draw the line. I can tell you this. A little bit deeper, I said a couple weeks ago we had 14 teams that I thought looked really, really strong. And I think that list shrunk to about 10 after this last set of results. So that's where we're at, but it's going to keep getting slimmer and slimmer as we go, Carter.
And I'll stand by my shout from last week, though. I'll stand by my shout from last week. They still get Kansas at home. They still get Houston at home. They still go at Arizona. They still get Texas Tech at home. They haven't played those top-end teams in a while, but Iowa State, keep them in the mix.
Iowa State, keep them in the mix, absolutely. But we'll be back. We're going to talk about the bubble right after the break here on the Field of 68, Fielding the 68 right after this.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, you sign up using bonus code FIELD, you deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. If you're not a member of the Field of 68's On3 community, make sure to go check us out. Get access to all of Jeff Goodman and Rob Doster's written content, including coaching carousel breakdowns, info on who is and isn't entering the transfer portal, insider recruiting information from none other than Joe Tipton, X's and O's analysis of all the teams in college basketball, and access to our message board community. A 7-day trial costs you $1. The Field of 68 on 3. Get the scoop.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. Tonight, right now, it's time. There are teams sitting there waiting. Okay, what side of the bubble are we on? Let's get right into it. Rocco, let's talk about your last four in right now.
Yeah, so last four in, we were just talking about during the break. Miami stays in this group. Again, Miami, the problem I have with them is they don't have a win against the Field right now. They have 4 road wins that matter. Unfortunately, none of those teams are going to the tournament at this stage. That would be Wake Forest, Syracuse, Ole Miss, and Notre Dame. They also have a 5-3 road neutral record and a 4-1 record in the top 2 quads on the road. Those are really important records, and establishing yourself as a road team for these last spots every year. That helps Miami get above the mountain. Even though they don't have a win against the Field, they're going to have to work on that. Obviously, the ACC is good enough. They'll have more chances. I go to Oklahoma State next, a newcomer. Lucas did a nice job highlighting the Pokes at the start of the show. And now you look at Oklahoma State. Obviously, they've got the BYU win to headline the resume. They also beat UCF and Texas A&M, 8-9 type teams at home this year. The things you don't like about the Pokes is their best. They do have one decent road win at Utah. That's their only road win of note in the top 2 quadrants. They're 1-3 in those 4 opportunities. And the way that these big conferences weight their schedules, they have one of the weaker schedules in the Big 12, sort of like UCF does, where we'll see how many road games they can actually get by the end. But for now, they're just one of the better options based on the fact that they're 9-6 in meaningful games. You double check everything with the WAB and the strength of resume. They both have the Pokes in the top 39 of the country, and they're in a power conference. And I like the way they play. They obviously outplayed BYU. Carter, you could talk all day about that. So I've got them in. New Mexico takes a tough loss at home in convincing fashion to Utah State. They're hanging on for today. Obviously, I still like the things I liked before. The road win at VCU is important. It's a quad 1 win, and it's a team that's starting to sneak up towards the bubble. Colorado State still matters a little bit on the road, but they're right there on the cutoff. They have the subpar loss to New Mexico State that they're still dealing with. But overall, it's a 10-5 team in meaningful games, and Santa Clara is right here on the bubble with them. That's my last team in, and they punished Santa Clara in a home game, and that's why New Mexico's still above them on the pecking order. It should always be noted that in that game, Jake Ensminger did not play, one of the most important players for the Broncos. But still a convincing result for the Lobos. Last but not least, Santa Clara stays in the Field, had them in on Monday. Obviously a team that needs road wins. Their only big one left is at St. Mary's. That would require a sweep over St. Mary's. Now, today for Field of 68 consensus, we have the Broncos as our WCC champion. What a thought that is. I haven't even seen this team play for a WCC championship game since I've lived here. So that would be phenomenal. And thank you, Field of 68. We love you. But in reality, I've still got them as an at-large type of team. And 1-3 against quad 1 is problematic. 3-4 against the top 2A quads, a little problematic. A nice road win at Pacific didn't hurt, Pacific's played so much better the last month that's actually a quad 2 win, and they're 8-5 away from home, and they also scheduled so well in the top 100 in scheduling. That helps on the bubble too. So the Broncos are in.
I love it. Lucas, let's see your last 4 in.
Well, I'm going to peek a little bit over Rocco's shoulder, and I'll just say that my last four in are Miami, Oklahoma State, New Mexico, and Santa Clara. For maybe the first time in, I don't know, 3-4 years we've been doing this show together. I think this might be the first time Rocco and I have shared our last 4 in the exact same order. And I think this comes as a bit of a surprise to me too, because I really struggled, especially with the last 2 today, especially when you compare New Mexico and Santa Clara, who both don't have a superb quantity of quality wins, as Rocco alluded to. When you compare that with teams on the outside looking in, like a Texas and a Missouri, both of whom have had really good wins and more of them. So it's a tricky spot where you lean a little bit more on metrics with teams that have had, lesser opportunities. Santa Clara's only played 4 quadrant 1 games. New Mexico's only played 5 of them. You compare that to a Texas who's played 9. There's certainly a difference there. I think that when it got down to these last couple spots for me, it's more what was the least offensive resume. What has the things that will leave you out of the field more than else? And New Mexico has, top 50 metrics across the board, except for 56 in BPI, top 50 averages across both resume and quality metrics. You can say the same about Santa Clara. Obviously, Santa Clara has a really bad quadrant 4 loss that you can leave as a reason for exclusion, but they're 13-4 against the upper 3 quadrants. That kind of outweighs it compared to some of these other teams. But I think, down the stretch, those teams will have more opportunities to move ahead. Whereas, New Mexico and particularly Santa Clara will have to deal with a little more landmines down the stretch to stay in the picture. But for now, those teams stay on the edge. To Rocco's point, New Mexico has the head-to-head win over Santa Clara. Hence, when it gets this tight, they keep it as 1-1. But what's interesting is, Rocco, correct me if I'm wrong on this, typically you'd send last 2 at-large teams together to the first 4. You'd have to kind of switch that up around to avoid a first 4 rematch, correct?
Yeah, if you have the flexibility to do so, they would, and we have that with this group of 4. Now, obviously, there's other.
I had to switch these 4 when I actually went to bracketing.
Yeah, so in this case, you would have Miami take on New Mexico and have the Pokes take on the Broncos. Yep.
So I want to dive into some of those teams a little bit more, but before I do that, there's too much of a coincidence that you guys had the exact same last 4. Are you sure you guys aren't doing Dagan a favor by making it easier, making the graphic so he only has to use the same one over?
Rocco's not on an iPhone. I don't think I can text that.
Yeah, there's that, and we like to challenge Dagan, so that's quite contrary to what our actual goals are within this show. So I would say no to that.
With Santa Clara being the last team in for you guys, they're in the WCC. We see a team like Gonzaga who got hurt pretty badly losing to Portland. It's such a dangerous road kind of in the WCC where you have limited chances to move to upgrade your position, but you have so many landmines you can walk into where it can kind of blow up in your face a little bit. With Santa Clara, I mean, Lucas, what can they afford going forward to get into the tournament? Do they have to beat Gonzaga? Is that an absolute must-win, or can they just beat St. Mary's and can they afford the loss to Gonzaga?
No, I think if they win out, except for Gonzaga at home, I'd feel pretty good actually about where they are. I think that at that point they'd have 2 quadrant 1 wins, most likely if St. Mary's were to hang on barely to quadrant 1 at home. They'd at least be in that case. I think the thing for them is there's a counter to that. Not having opportunities is certainly an issue if you haven't won one. But Santa Clara has won one already. And I think having an easier conference schedule at times affords the opportunity to boost the road record significantly. And that's where you can kind of point to St. Mary's being 6-2 in true road games this season and playing, an easier strength of schedule on the road than maybe a high major program would have. Can give them that leg up in a different category than one that we typically talk about.
Rocco, I want to talk about Miami here for a second before we move on. With the Hurricanes, they're playing not their best ball as of late. You mentioned they don't have a win against anybody in the field at the moment. Yeah. How do you see this going for Miami? How many how many quad one wins do you need to see from the Canes to firmly put them into the field?
Well, I mean, I want to see them beat a tournament team first, and then we'll go from there. But the thing is like I've watched this team; they're extremely talented. We know they have 3 to 4 NBA players on the team, and it's a new coach in Jai Lucas, and they're just navigating the storm for the first time together. There's a lot of individuals. It could go. We know the history of this school. There's a lot of distractions at Miami. The travel's a little bit different, either going in there or for them to leave there. So. They host North Carolina next Tuesday. Obviously, if they handle Boston College like they need to tomorrow in Boston, they get those 2 wins. They'll be solidly in by this show next week. But then they got to go to NC State. They got the Virginias. And then they close the season at SMU and hosting Louisville. So I'd just say out of all those, there's about 7 big ones in there. Give me a 3 and 4. It should be good enough. A 4 and 3, and I would say for sure they'll be in. And they're a very volatile team, like I said, because if they hit their stride and their upside, they're the kind of team that could run the table. On the flip side, if they all become, individuals and not a team, it's certainly a team that could fall apart and not even accept an NIT bid.
At this point in the year, there's some of these teams where you feel like they'll figure themselves out. Like there are teams that I'm not worried about for bracketology in a month. Like Miami's probably one of those teams. They're 2 and 3 in quadrant 1 right now. They've only played half of their quadrant 1 games. They're still scheduled to play 5 more the rest of the year. They're a team that will figure themselves out, plus or minus on the bubble come March, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the consensus last 4 in here, we have Cal, Oklahoma State, Miami, and New Mexico. Rocco, talk to me about Cal right now and what you're seeing from Mark Madsen and the fellas.
Yeah, it's amazing that they're being discussed, first of all. And, they went to Miami and got that win. That's really helped them in this situation because on my board, they're next to Miami and UCLA, 2 teams they beat away from home. UCLA game was at the Chase Center in the NBA. So Cal just directly, if they are really that close at the end, would have some big advantages against those 2 in particular. But overall, winning at Stanford helped a lot. Stanford's fallen off the bubble just a bit. It's still an important road win to prove they can get it done away from home, combined with the UCLA win. And so it's more just about the results for Cal. The way they've performed has not exactly been in their favor. The net still has them 55th, for example. They got blown out at Kansas State at the beginning of the year. So there's certainly some concerns. They've got to host Clemson. It's a big one here tomorrow, not far from where I live. So they're going to just have to continue proving themselves in my book because they're even in their wins. They beat Miami by 1. They had a rally late to beat UCLA. The North Carolina game, they actually played. That was probably their best performance for all 40 minutes. But from a basketball perspective, they've really, really improved their shooting. They're like completely opposite of what they were last year, and they're a fun team to watch. So I really hope the train can keep rolling.
Absolutely. Lucas, do you have anything else to add on Cal before we move on? Muted.
I need to stop being sick and coughing. I need to stop being sick and coughing and muting while Rocco talks. This is 2 straight shows. I am begging for the sickness to be over. But on Cal, to the point of lower metrics, after their loss to Duke less than a month ago, and that's, I think, January 14th, they were 72nd in the net. They were 84th on KenPom. Like now they're up to 55th, I believe, in the net, Rocco mentioned, and they're up to 60 on KenPom. Like it's the development they're making is positive. And obviously when we look at bracketology, we're looking at it as a snapshot as of today. And the snapshot shows those metrics lower than most bubble teams, but certainly in a mix and trending in the right direction, where if they continue on that trajectory, they've already put themselves on the right side of both Rocco and I's cut line, our consensus cut line. The current trajectory you feel pretty good about.
Lucas, who do you have on the wrong side of the bubble?
So for me, my first 4 out right now, I hinted at a couple of these, is Texas, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, and Missouri right now. Texas, to the point that we've brought up a couple times in the show, it's just they have some really good high-quality wins. They have really good power metrics, but they are just 6 and 9 against the upper 3 quadrants. They're 3 below 500 in those games. I think we're all going to start to learn our lesson again from last year as Texas picks up a couple more of these wins. I had Texas further out earlier this week. And it's not as though beating South Carolina at home is necessarily a needle mover. What it does is it fixes that record a little bit. The more they add wins, it's just the quantity. They have the quality already. They have the power record, the power metrics. It's about being able to build up the quantity of wins right now, and adding a win over South Carolina helped them get in that mix. On the opposite side of that, Ohio State completely lacks a quadrant 1 win right now. They're 0-6 in such games, which puts them on the wrong side of the bubble for me, along with a couple other factors. Virginia Tech has a little bit of a trickier resume in that its resume metrics are behind just slightly of some of the bubble. They're around 46 on average in resume metrics when you compare that to the teams we had in the field at Santa Clara at 42, New Mexico at 45. They're just behind that with quality metrics that are further behind that group. And they also have a quadrant 3 loss, which is pretty similar to New Mexico having one, Santa Clara having one in quadrant 4. As you get to Missouri's still in a trickier spot as far as metrics go. They're still 68th in the net. It's really low. It's obviously a metric that is a little bit more for sorting than it is for selection and seeding, but we haven't seen teams that far down get a lot of bids in the past. They're also under 500 against the upper 3 quadrants. 9 of their wins this season have come in quadrant 4, which puts them in a work-to-do department for me.
Rocco, who do you have on the wrong side of the bubble?
Yeah, I start with Mizzou. I saw them play Saturday. They're basically just in a position where they have the big road win at Kentucky. They have quality road wins with Florida, which is an improving home win, and Auburn. But I'd like to see them continue balancing out. Certainly, just their record. They're 6-7 in the games that matter. And again, they're not as good of wins as Texas has quite yet. Obviously, Texas has a road Alabama win, so they can't overcome that record as much. They played 6 times on the road, Carter, in the top 2 quads, and they're 1-5 in those games. And the one win is big, like I said, at Kentucky's matters. But right now, Kentucky's a 7 seed, so it doesn't have the kind of weight that you need to overcome the poor record. And they're 2-6 overall away from Columbia. And I think that's a big problem as well. That's a 25% win percentage. And so there's just some things you want to see get cleaned up. I know they go to the other Columbia tomorrow. They're playing the Gamecocks. And so if they get a win there, it's certainly they'll be a little bit more selectable. That improves all those road records I just mentioned, plus gets them to even in the meaningful games at 7-7. So Mizzou's right there. My next team out is San Diego State. For me, it's more of a, man, this team is good. And I know their metrics aren't perfect. And they did lose the game to Utah State that they needed for an at-large. They have the home Troy loss, which is problematic. But we saw them beat New Mexico. We see them tied for first in the Mountain West right now. And I just think that they would be a hotly debated team in the room. And that's what this is all about. This is a conversation between 12 gentlemen and ladies in the room about which teams belong. I think San Diego State, it'd be hard to dismiss them in an argument. So I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll see how the results play out from here. But they do have at least the one New Mexico win, and we'll see how that plays out later in Mountain West play. And then next is Ohio State and Virginia Tech. Ohio State, I took a really deep look at after winning at Maryland yesterday. Unfortunately, Maryland's not even in a top 2 quad anymore on the road. That's how bad the Terps are. Who would have thought? And right now they're 1-5 in their 6 tournament level opportunities. And the one win is UCLA, who's basically a bubble team right now. And it's at home. That's a team that traveled 3 time zones. It's not that impressive. And their 2 road wins that mean anything are Northwestern and Oregon. So it's just not quite enough to get the Buckeyes over the hump, in my view. They have the record and all that. The other kicker is 247th strength of schedule is one of the poor ones out of all the bubble teams. So again, they're just losing some of those comparisons. But I think they're one good win away from easily being in, and it's not that far off. Virginia Tech, very similar, but down to 56th in net. Their home wins are nice with Virginia and Cal. Virginia being the big one. Went to 3 overtimes. They've had heartbreak galore. I want to stick up for them, but everything's just a little bit off in terms of comparing them to the teams that did go in, and they're sitting on the outside looking in.
Rocco, Lucas has Texas in his first four out. I noticed you didn't have Texas on yours as well. Where do you have the Longhorns right now, and why?
They're the fifth team out, Carter. So they're right there as well. And it's a lot of it to do with being 3 games under 500 in those games that mean something. The wins, like I said, are there. They've also got a home loss to Mississippi State that's aging not very well. That's in quad 3 today. They've lost to Arizona State, who's not a tournament team. Excuse me there. But, yeah, so Texas is just a couple wins away, and they'll be right back in there.
I love it. I don't love the coughing, though. Everyone's having a cough on this show. Drink up some water right now. Let's move on.
February.
Let's move on. Yeah, you gotta chill out with the traveling, Rocco. We gotta keep you home in California for a while.
It's tough. It's tough. We got too many teams to see, Carter.
Too many teams to see, not enough time. Consensus first 4 out with Texas, Missouri, Ohio State, and Virginia Tech. Lucas, anything to add on these?
Well, no, they're my 4 teams. I mean, they match my consensus first 4 out, and I think they actually match my order when I started this update this morning, as I think I had Texas, Missouri, Ohio State, and Virginia Tech. As time went on, I felt a little bit better about Ohio State in particular, and then Virginia Tech. To Rocco's point, of Ohio State does have a win over the field, and its metrics are pretty rock solid across the board to be in the mix for contention. And they are, 2 games above 500 in those quadrant 1 through 3 games, and you compare that to a Texas and Missouri. But I think that overall, those are the 4 teams that I have right there. And I think that to my point earlier about struggling with New Mexico and Santa Clara as my last 2 teams in the field, I went through all 4 of these as contenders for spots 67 and 68.
The consensus next 4 out we have on here: San Diego State, Seton Hall, VCU, and TCU. Rocco, quickly, Seton Hall hasn't been great for them. What can they do to get on the right side of the bubble?
Win basketball games, like a lot of them, because the Big East. We'll dive into the Big East here towards the end of the show, but yeah, they're down to a road UConn and a home St. John's game for real weight later. Of course, they beat NC State on a neutral court earlier. That's going to be there for the duration. But right now they've dropped 5 of their last 7, and they went from looking really good to now being pretty easy to leave out. So it starts with a road game at Creighton, never easy. Creighton's not playing well right now. So if they win that road game at Creighton, I'll certainly take a deeper look again on Monday. But I think they really got to keep stacking wins, because even after that, it's Providence, Butler, DePaul, Georgetown. And again, the way Seton Hall's playing, can you really envision them ripping off those 5 in a row? It's hard to envision.
It is very, very hard to envision. Let's move on then. Let's not talk about Seton Hall anymore. Let's move on to a better story. Miami of Ohio. Lucas, yeah. They're undefeated right now. No quad 1 wins. That's people have been knocking them left and right for that. But who cares? They're undefeated. How many losses can they afford in the regular season to still make the big dance?
Well, I don't think there's any loss that they can take and feel comfortable about. I would start with. I think that and feel comfortable. I think that they should be able to take 2 regular season losses and 1 in the conference tournament. I think they should be in the mix still. I don't think that would get in. I think 1 in the regular season and 1 in the conference tournament probably gets in. And I think losing in just the conference tournament, they would get in. But I think that it's certainly a tricky spot. I think that the thing that we have to talk about with Miami of Ohio is the only way they are in the at-large pool is if they lose. So if they were to lose, their resume metrics will inevitably fall from where they are right now, which is about a mid-30s average. So let's assume one of those losses drops them to a low 40s average. That's pretty in line with where a lot of bubble teams are right now. Santa Clara is 42nd. New Mexico is 45. Miami would be right around that mix in resume metrics, and its quality metrics, unless something drastically changes, will be far behind the rest of the bubble. They average 87th across those right now. So they'd be sub-bubble quality metrics. They'd be bubble resume metrics without a quadrant 1 win. They would have played, currently they rank 364th in the country in non-conference strength of schedule, in the net non-conference strength of schedule, which doesn't include having played 3 non-D1s. Those don't count in the as part of the equation to reach number 364. So I think that takes a toll. I think it would be hard for them to get in because of those factors. But obviously, it's going to be a big juggle when it comes to having such an elite record versus having the other things that are in the mix. And that's where I think that you'd lean on having those resume metrics be where they need to be. If they're above bubble, I'd feel pretty good about where they stand because of the benefit of, I think it'd be hard to leave out a record that elite out of the field. But if their resume metrics are a touch lower than where most of the bubble teams are, they'd already be behind in a lot of other areas. I could see them getting left out. So for me, I'd say 2 losses is probably it.
So 3, you're saying they're out.
I mean, it's so early to tell and what those and where those losses are, who their losses are to, what the margins are like, how that changes where their metrics stand. But I think 3 losses would probably be out. But I think that there's a whole lot of basketball to be played before we reach that point.
Rocco, quickly before we go to break, if they run the table and they do this thing, what's their seed in line in your opinion?
I still think they're stuck around an 11 seed based on the fact that they are 89th in the Ken Palm and, they're 50s in net. Most of the bubble teams getting in right now favor heavily to them when it comes to power numbers. And that's just the way it's gone. Like we saw last year, UC San Diego was phenomenal, and the committee dishes them a 12. I'm like, get out of here. And so if they're going to give UC San Diego a 12, Miami, Ohio is in deep trouble. But I'll tell you this, as it pertains to in or out, it'll be fascinating for a couple of other reasons outside of all the metric stuff. It's because, A, there's not a MAC member on the committee. That could matter, could not matter. It's important to know. The other thing is there's never been a team in history with more than 28 wins that didn't get in. And right now, Miami, Ohio is 23-0. They have 8 games left on their schedule plus a 8-team tournament in Cleveland. So we're looking at a team that's almost for sure going to be above 28 wins if and when they lose in the MAC tournament. And if they make a run to the MAC finals, there's a very high probability that they're going to be north of 30 victories, Carter. So
they can only reach 29 against D1. They can only reach 21 versus D1, I think, is their max, right? Because there's 3 non-D1 wins.
3 non-D1 wins. Okay, we'll go off of that.
I think they max at 29-1. I think if they lose in the MAC title, I think they max at 29-1. But that's math I'm doing kind of on the fly.
It'd be 30. It'd be 30 wins at that point because. But that's a good point. That's a good point on the D1, and that's a good get out of jail free card for the committee. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So I mean, in general, my feelings after last year with Drake and UC San Diego, the way they were treated and the rumors and the thinking of those staffs thinking they might not get in when they were clearly deserving. It doesn't look great for Miami, Ohio, because they haven't been able to play against anybody that's near anything. And it's partially the system's fault. They tried to schedule Power Fives. Nobody said yes. And here we are. So I kind of want to see what plays out because I want to see how the NCAA would handle such a thing.
And I'm sure this won't be the last time we're talking about Miami of Ohio here on Fielding the 68.
I hope not.
When we come back, it better not be. If I hear 3 losses, I'm going to see a team with that great of a record. Just put them in. Throw the metrics out the window for a second. Let them in. The story's too cool. Right. But anyhow, when we come back, we'll talk about the Jayhawks' big wins. They don't care about that, exactly. And then the Zags losing to Portland right after this.
As you know by now, we have teamed up with BetMGM again this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we will have special offers for Field of 68 fans, including same-game parlays, best-in-class live betting, and daily odds boost. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app. You sign up using bonus code FIELD. You deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. Make this college basketball season one for the history books. Make it legendary. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code FIELD and get your $1,500 first bet offer. today.
Are you trying to follow everything happening in college basketball? It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for recruiting news, game analysis, portal updates, and much, much more. For just $50 a year, you get access to the same information that your favorite coaching staff is subscribed to. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help. Make sure you subscribe today.
Welcome back to Fielding the 68 here on the Field of 68 Media Network. Fellas, it's time to talk about the Jayhawks. Big wins this week, Saturday. We all know what happened between AJ and BYU. Kansas takes them down. Score lied a little bit at the end there. They had that one in hand. And then they go on the road and defeat a Christian Anderson-less Texas Tech team. Doesn't matter. They still get the win. Rocco, how high can the Jayhawks climb after these huge wins?
Well, the answer to that question always is the remaining schedule. So it doesn't matter how they got here. They're a 3 seed today. They go to Iowa State. They play Arizona twice. And they host Houston. And they also have an important road game now at Oklahoma State. That means a little bit too. So they have those 5. They have a nicely balanced schedule where they mix in some Big 12 bottom half teams in between. They close with Kansas State. So we'll see. Like, obviously, if they win at Hilton Magic or in Tucson, they're going to continue climbing quickly. And, of course, beating Arizona and Houston in the fog would mean a lot as well. So we'll see how high they can climb. Today, they're an extremely solid 3 seed. They're the 10th team in order on my board. And that's a drastic change because they were fighting for a 4 seed not too long ago. And I think overall, you look at the Jayhawks' body of work, they've got a road win at NC State. That's improving. We've talked about the Wolfpack already. The road win at Texas Tech, obviously. And the Tennessee win's getting better. Tennessee cracked my top 16 today. So there's 4 wins right now in the top half of Quadrant 1. That's tied for second best in the nation. And they have no bad losses. And all of their other stuff, the power numbers, the quality numbers, the whatever numbers that everybody looks at on these sheets are all in the top 12. And I think here's the other factor. The important factor is committee will no doubt talk about Darren Peterson's saga, his health, why he's sitting sometimes, why he's playing sometimes. The one thing that was really good coming out of the Texas Tech game is that he played 35 minutes. Even if he doesn't play a full 30 minutes in these bottom half Big 12 games, if he's going hard in these, Arizona matchups, the Houston, the Iowa State matchups, that tells the committee that they're going to go full go with him once the tournament starts. And I think they'll give Kansas a favorable evaluation due to that. And I think it was really important that they at least had one big game where he went 35 minutes.
Let's say he goes back to that, though, and is sitting out some of these games and only playing 15, 20 minutes or so, is back on this minutes restriction sort of thing. Will the committee punish them at that point, or how should the committee judge that?
I think they should just take them for what they are based on their results, because they're showing different examples of him being able to play the full game. There's other examples where he can't or isn't for whatever reason. So I think we're at a point right now, you just have to judge a book by its cover. They are who they are. There's also an argument to be made, like when he's not on the floor, the defense takes a little bit of a step forward. Obviously, the offense takes a giant step backwards. But they were able to beat Tennessee completely without him. And so Kansas is still a pretty darn good team when he sits. And so I think you just take all the results for what they are. But yeah, so it is so speculative. We're basically guessing because, like, you have 12 people in a room, right, Carter? So maybe like 3 people think they're much worse without him. 3 people think they're close to the same, and 6 don't know what to do. So at the end of the day, you're just voting into a machine and getting what the results are. But they're getting compared to teams like Purdue, Vanderbilt, Michigan State, Iowa State, and the like at this point. And that's what it comes down to. Do you believe Kansas is better than those teams or not?
Lucas, thoughts on the Jayhawks?
Yeah. To the point you asked Rocco about second, I think I'm never a guy who thinks they'll punish a team. It's more about what might get boosted as a result of that. I don't think you can punish a team for winning a game with a player when you don't know if they would have still won that game without him or not. I think you can boost a team perhaps for having a guy now more in the mix, or in the case of other teams, a player who missed games that they lost and then they've been successful with them. I'm more likely to boost a team than I am punish a team. But overall, I think to Rocco's point, they're top 12 across every single metric. Welcome to at least the 3 seed. That pretty much guarantees that in my eyes. It's pretty hard to be elsewhere when you're universally reviewed between 8 and 12. You're probably deserve to be on a 3 seed line. And I think that there's certainly the remaining schedule to be in the mix for at the very least a 2 seed. Right now, they're third in the country in net strength of schedule overall. And to Rocco's point, you still get Arizona twice, Iowa State on the road, Houston at home. They probably don't finish with the toughest strength of schedule in the country because of what the SEC has to offer. And teams like Alabama and Auburn, I believe, are 1 and 2 right now. But there's certainly a chance Kansas finishes with the top 5 strength of schedule in the entire country and a very, very strong record. That puts them in the mix to be a 2 seed. But for me, Rocco has them 10 overall right now. I have Kansas 9.
Moving on to Gonzaga, they had the bad loss to Portland this week, lost by 7. And a what on earth is happening game where people are, if you weren't locked into the game, people are texting you, hey, tune into Gonzaga. They're losing to Portland right now at halftime and everything. And with this Gonzaga thing, they've had a couple games that have been dicey down the stretch in the WCC. They lose to Portland. Lucas, how does this hurt Gonzaga's chance at getting a higher seed in the tournament?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, when you look at, other teams that are in the mix, the top of the board, not many of them have quadrant 3 losses. They're the only team in the net top 21, in fact, to have a quadrant 3 loss. So certainly that's a blow. I think that's going to drop them down to a 4 seed for me today. I think one thing that's an advantage for Gonzaga is if they do finish on these top 4 seed lines, not a lot of teams want to go to Portland. Odds are likely Portland's still going to be on the board geographically for them to be as a first round site. So that at least helps the Bulldogs. But I think that, it's certainly a blow to their seeding ceiling. They do still get Santa Clara and St. Mary's on the road, opportunities to get another quadrant 1 win or 2 that can move them back up the board somewhat. But I do think that having a quadrant 3 loss most of the teams ahead of them don't even have the chances to lose another quadrant 3 game, or they have very few chances to do so. I think that's going to leave Gonzaga more on the 3 or 4 lines at best moving forward.
Rocco, in your opinion, how does this hurt the Zags going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the dream of a 1 seed is completely out the window with one result, and so that's brutal. I mean, it was going to take a little bit of an inside straight for them to get there, regardless. But so much of what Gonzaga does, due to the conference that they're in, has to do with how they perform. So if they go out and blow everybody out by 40 in this league, it's a good enough league that they would get into the top 3 or 2 of Pomeroy, for example, probably Torvik, and then have a discussion about that. And we talked about that last week when they had the 2-point win over San Francisco, which San Francisco's down a little bit right now. So every one of their performances matters just a little bit more than the teams from the super conferences, because those already have a lot of weight on them within the resume. And so losing to Portland obviously set them back. They fell from 9th overall to 14th overall for me on the Bracketeer board. And I think going forward, they have to go to Santa Clara. They have to go to St. Mary's. And so those are, on one end, opportunities to solidify themselves, show that the Portland game was more of an anomaly than a concern. But on the flip side, if they don't perform well in those 2 big games and maybe have another shaky performance or 2 along the way through some of their other games, like watch out tomorrow, they're going to be at a sold-out Oregon State game, where for Oregon State, that's their Super Bowl. And so Gonzaga has to bring it in those games. They have the bullseye in this league on their back. That will tell the committee where they should be seated. So their variance in seed right now is still very unknown.
Yeah.
Moving on. Say it. That's their Super Bowl. Oh. Don't most Oregon State fans aren't most Oregon State fans Seahawk fans? Gotta be, right?
Yes, they should be.
Their Super Bowl is the day after still.
I don't know. They beat Gonzaga there last year, and it was one of the better court storming we saw all over the West Coast last year. So I know they're fired up, and it's on a different day, so they can party both days.
Hey, no problem with that.
Yeah, Sunday fun day.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to the Big East. Obviously, as we saw earlier, talking about the 1 seeds, we have UConn on the 1 seed line, but then you have St. John's and Villanova. Rocco, in a weaker Big East this season that people have talked about a ton, where can St. John's and Villanova go from here?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think the greater Big East is the answer to that question. I think the league needs somebody. It was Seton Hall for a while. Maybe it won't be long term, but if somebody out of the rest of the league, outside of the top three, can emerge and become a solid number 4 for the conference, rip off 6 in a row, rip off 8 in a row, get into the top 50 and all the power numbers. Knock off a St. John's, knock off a UConn. That will give the league that extra apple that it desperately needs to bite out of as well. But as it stands today, everybody's kind of in purgatory until they play each other. So obviously we have the blockbuster coming up tonight at Madison Square Garden. That will be great for the league, put the league on the spotlight for its own night. Very cool. I'm glad they're doing that on a Friday. But as we go forward, Nova is going to host UConn, I think, down the stretch. A couple other matchups between the two, but I think the real key is just getting a 4th team established, and everybody else is all over the map. Georgetown's suddenly playing better now, but do you trust them to play well for another month? No. So it's fascinating. But as it stands, like Nova is suffering due to that, and I want to circle it back to Villanova directly because as I did the breakdown today, they had Seton Hall wins before, as did UConn and St. John's. And now those wins are not showing up as wins against the field. So Villanova's only win against the field is against a 9 seed in Wisconsin. That should be a road game. They played it in Milwaukee. It goes on the team sheet as a neutral site win. Everything about Villanova is mostly clean, but just having that one win against the field, they're the only team in that category in the 9 seed or lower range. And that's hurting a lot, and it's a lot of it's because the Big East doesn't have the opponents to offer this season.
Lucas, anything to add about St. John's and Villanova?
Yeah, I think the point I'll add on Villanova is that the Big East has a lot of these not bubble, not tournament, but also not horrible teams, which are almost the worst case scenario from a scheduling standpoint. But they've done their best away from home. They've beat Seton Hall on the road. They beat Butler on the road. They beat Providence on the road. Those are 3 solid road victories at this point, which gives you confidence that they'll be able to continue to do that when they still get Georgetown, Creighton, Xavier at home in their next 4 games. Not to mention the road, quote unquote, neutral site game in Milwaukee over Wisconsin. The other thing I'll say to Villanova's credit is, of its 5 losses this season, one's to BYU, Michigan, St. John's, UConn. 3 of those games are away from home. Their loss strength is really strong, which at least keeps them from dropping. To Rocco's point about their relatively clean resume, it's their losses are really strong. If they're not many losses, which keeps them as a single-digit seed for me. They're also a 9 seed for me today. But I think the Big East, I don't think there is a 4th team that's coming unless it's Seton Hall. Georgetown's definitely played better since Big Vince has been back in the lineup. They've won 4 in a row, but none of them have been really needle movers, and they're starting from pretty far behind. Butler's fallen off the bubble. Seton Hall is really the main team that's in the mix here and does still have opportunities, but the Big East's bottom is getting better, but not good enough to be bubble teams, which makes it a really hard path for the bubble team singular, I think, that's left on the outside looking in being Seton Hall. And that's having to deal with Georgetown with Big Vince playing much better, with, Creighton's always dangerous at home. Marquette's getting, Nigel James really playing well, and they're playing at a higher level. I don't think any of these teams are tournament level teams, but they make things dangerous, particularly on the road for a bubble team that has a lot of work to do and not many opportunities to counter any potential losses in Seton Hall.
I know this could be an absurd question, and I understand the absurdity of this before I ask it, but could you see any kind of world where we see a 2021 Georgetown-like run in the Big East tournament from any of these teams currently way outside the bubble?
I think we're too early to tell which teams are going to be hot. Georgetown's playing well really right now, But Georgetown's playing well right now and hasn't beaten a UConn or a St. John's. And that's really all it is. It's like, even if you're going to be able to make a run, you're going to have to beat UConn or St. John's, and probably both. Or at least there's a decent chance you'll have to beat both to get there. And I think you're either going to have to beat UConn once or beat Villanova and St. John's. Like that's a tough path, I think that. But it's certainly not a deep enough league where there's a lot of teams you have to get through. But one of those teams is UConn, which has been so much better than the rest of the league throughout most of it. At least has been better at not losing. They've played a lot of close games, but they've won all of them, every single one. Like no matter how much you can point to, their quality metrics are behind other one seeds. As I said earlier, they're still 22-1. Their only loss was to Arizona without two of their starters. Getting through UConn's a tough test on its own, let alone having to win 2 or 3 other games.
And they're just steamrolling in their last 2 wins right now. Rocco, games to watch this weekend.
Yeah, games to watch this weekend. We jumped right into that. I was not ready for that, but I'll give you this. We obviously have UConn St. John's tonight. We also have Houston BYU, as you could have told us. I know you'll be locked and loaded for that. Illinois Michigan State is a blockbuster in East Lansing. Michigan State. What are they going to do about Fears? I think Izzo mentioned he might bench him, but they're also playing the hottest team in the country probably. So good luck with that. And then I think on the bubble, I'm looking at this game down the street, Clemson at California. Again, California's got to continue to answer the bell, prove themselves. Clemson's really, really solid fundamentally. That's going to be a really tough game, even though Clemson's the one who had to fly out west. They've now been out west for a week. They beat Stanford the other night. Oh, it's going to be a really big test there. SMU, they just lost a home game. They're slipping towards the bubble. They're not quite on the bubble yet, but they were my top 10 seed today. They've been 7, 8, 9. Now they're down to a 10. Certainly don't want to lose at Pitt. That's something that only Ohio State can do, as the Buckeyes know. And so the last one I'll throw out, once again, Missouri at South Carolina. It seems boring. It probably won't be the most exciting game of the day, but Missouri's got to get out there and get that road win. They have a good chance to get back in the field on Monday with a win there.
Lucas, any games to watch before we head out?
Yeah, I'll add in a couple other opportunities. Wisconsin, Indiana is a pretty sizable one on that kind of 8, 9, 10 line right now for those teams. As another one, a couple teams that are just kind of monitoring that we didn't mention today, but are like maybe can get into the bubble mix. Washington has a really friendly closing schedule. Obviously, they have to take advantage of it, but their metrics are already top 50 in terms of quality metrics. They get a chance at UCLA to pick up an NCAA tournament level win. Virginia Tech goes at NC State, another opportunity. And why not? Screw it. Baylor, chance, opportunity. You go to Hilton. It's always an opportunity. You rule out Baylor for sure. They're far off the mix, but you win at Hilton and things change. Obviously, that's a small likelihood. KenPom gives us an 8% chance, but 8% is better than 0. And the Bears would certainly put themselves in the conversation should they win that game.
With it being Duke-Carolina weekend, I have to ask this. If Carolina got a win over Duke, an upset win, what could that do for the Tar Heels?
I think it puts them in the mix to be in the protected seed conversation. They already have a road win at Virginia, a team that I have as a 4 seed right now. I have North Carolina on my 5 right now, bottom half of the 5 line, but still on the 5. You beat a consensus number 1 seed who probably wouldn't fall from number 1 seed even with a loss to North Carolina. I think they'd be certainly in the conversation to be on the 4 seed.
Rocco, anything else to add on the Tar Heels? I think we lost Rocco. So we'll wrap up there. I think Rocco's saying, hey, it's time to leave. So yeah, exactly. Anyhow, that does it from us. Make sure to follow at the Field of 68. We'll have the full bracket reveal on there on all the social media channels as well. Make sure to tune in Monday. We'll be back 5 p.m. Eastern on the YouTube channel at the Field of 68 Media Network. And make sure to tune in. We'll see y'all then.